Hey, Slade, I thank you for coming today. Why don't you kick it off and tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and where you came from?
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Appreciate you having me. Boy, background, it all started in fifth grade. Actually, we'll move forward a little from there. I think you and I met around 2010, 11 timeframe, somewhere in there. I have been a penetration tester, I would say, for since like 2003 or so. Now I'm the director of security assessments at Contextual Security, and I think that means I just get to tell other people what to do now. Background before that, I worked in higher education. I worked at a consultancy, all doing computer support, computer security. Taught high school for a while. Before that, I was in the Navy, and before that was really, I would say, probably had a black belt in making bad decisions, which I'm just getting stripes in that now, but they're fewer and further between. Praise the Lord for that.
Yeah, that was interesting. We got you talked about how we met, and I was working at a power company here in Texas, and the IT side of the business decided, hey, we'd bring in this big consulting firm and do some pen testing, and somebody up there decided, hey, let's do this on the OT side, and let's just go. And of course, on the OT side, we're like, whoa, time out. What does that look like? And I don't want to just release somebody into the OT world, and because it was just different. So talk a bit about that, around how different it was. I mean, doing it on the IT side versus what we did on the OT side. And again, that was in 2010 versus today. And those same problems have just gotten bigger and broader. The difference between IT and OT, and how do you attack those same scenarios, right?
Yeah, that's a great point you're making there. Where when we met, this was all getting kind of new, kicking off. We both have an IT background. I had just finished working at an electrical engineering firm for a few years, and I learned more in that few years. I obviously, we're all lifelong learners, but being around those engineers and some of these guys who developed some of the safety breakers in transmission transformers and things like that, they would just make my ears bleed regularly. I remember one time a guy pulled me into his office and wanted to describe volt var to me, and he started writing all these equations on a whiteboard. And I'm like, hey, man, I am not smart. So I just need you to dumb this down. But I remember sitting there in that first power plant where we first met. I don't remember the name of it, but I remember coming up with the methodology with you and one of your coworkers. So and to be clear, I was a subcontractor for the big consulting firm. People with HR departments tend to shy away from me a little bit, which just keeps their HR people sane. And I totally understand that. It's not them, it's me. But I remember sitting there and with you and your coworker, and we're like, let's develop a methodology for doing this, because we can't just go in there and start slinging packets around with, some of those devices back then didn't have full TCP/IP stacks, for example. Right. And so I remember that there used to be a product called Bandolier that would work with Nessus, and it was supposed to tone it down and only run specific checks. And even that sometimes would go wrong in those environments. So we were just coming up with a way to do manual inventory, manual walkthroughs, really look at devices, go up and have an operators, open this up, show me the software version you're running, putting a tap on the wire and say, hey, send a command. Can we catch that command? And would a common IT tool like TCP relay, for example, would it be able to replay that command, particularly to something like an RTU? I remember at the time, when I went in there, the big firm was like, we want to go through and count all the PLCs. And I was like, well, the PLCs don't really do anything in these environments. Now the RTUs, they make stuff happen. And I remember the guy that was leading the project, like, what's an RTU? Let's not get into that. Let's ask the experts about that. But that's what's going to make a difference. I mean, you had one PLC, I think, that could light a boiler, and that was like, hey, let's look at that one. And the rest of them just kind of did statistics reporting type stuff. And so, we developed that methodology. And what I would encourage everybody to do, whether they're a consultant or a blue teamer in this environment, is to work with those engineering people and say, hey, how do we want to approach this? What are the big rocks for you? You know, what's the thing that if it goes away, is it revenue capture, or is it the ability to generate electricity, you know,
Right.
or generate whatever you do there, you know, it might be gas or water or whatever. But that's been really successful for us over the years, to go in and ask, what is it you're most worried about, and work from there.
Yeah, you know, I remember one of the sites we were at. I think we had the pre-job brief with the engineers and the control system owner, and we were talking through, like, this is what we're going to do, and this is where we're going to plug in, and this is the machine we're going to use, this is the process, just kind of talking at that high level, without talking too detailed, because you know, we're not talking about the commands we're running, because they wouldn't understand that. But we had just moved from that pre-job brief into the control room, or into the engineering room, and we hadn't even plugged in yet. And then something happened, and the unit had an issue, and they tripped the unit. And of course they come running down, and the first thing that everybody said was, "What'd you do?" They were looking at us, and we were like, "Wait, time out. We haven't plugged in. We haven't run anything." Like, we had to step away from our computers before they could prove what happened, to validate that it wasn't us. So we were the first thing they assumed, and rightfully so. Like, when you look at a scenario, what's the last thing that changed? The thing that was different in that space was us. We stood out. We had these processes we were talking about doing. They just assumed that we had done it. Luckily for us, it wasn't us, but still, it goes into the mindset of why these areas. One of the reasons why one of these areas are so difficult to go into and do these basic capabilities, that in an IT world, it wouldn't be that hard, because if I did something, you know, the email server has to reboot, you know, it's not the end of the world. Whereas in this environment, power is lost. Like, we're talking safety systems, and we're talking physical things that can happen, injure people, electricity not working, the grid could go down, you know, any domino effect. So there's reasons why these things are different, that not everybody, unless you've been in that world, and you talked about it, right? As you came from an IT world, and I came from an IT world way back, and until you've seen it and understand it firsthand, why it's different and what makes it so different, it's hard to grasp. You know, onboarding and building a team, that was some of the hardest things I had to do, was taking an IT person and explain to them, and really having them understand, because I could tell them, but they still would want to, hey, I'm IT, I'm gonna reboot your box, and they didn't grasp that I can't reboot an operator station because he's controlling the thing, and if he can't see it, that's a problem, and there is no scenario where that is okay.
That's so good, because the workstation itself will function as any other, you know,
Correct.
platform on that OS, you know, Windows, or if it's a Linux box, you know, it'll be back real quick. But the thing, the reboot procedure for that could be a day. You know,
Right.
if this thing goes down, you know, it might be gone for a while. And to your earlier point on if there's a way for people to interact with this when they watch it, I would love to get some feedback on like how many of you have been blamed for something when it wasn't you. And you know, kind of a, you know, war story. I worked for a consultancy in the early 2000s, and one of our clients was we'll call it the Department of Justice. You know, one of their facilities. And 100% of the time, you know, we would go up to this place in the middle of nowhere, and you know, it's all and most of it was underground, and get in there, and you know, we'd be standing there with an Ethernet cable, and somebody would come running into the room, and after you've gone through all these checks to get in this room, and you have to use, you know, certain laptops and all this stuff, and it's like, oh, no police cars on the West Coast can do anything in this such and such a database right now, you know, whether it be NICS or IAFIS or something. And what did you do? And I think, you know, the key in that moment was to be able to dialogue with the people. You know, we weren't defensive. Just
Sure.
like, hey, this is where we are. This is our equipment. Feel free to look at it. You know, we can tell you everything we've done from the moment we walked in. And I used to have to do that with I used to just write down every command and the time when I did it. And now I capture, if I'm using Kali, I'll actually capture the bash history with timestamps and things like that. But yeah, not defensive at all, and just work through it with them, and show them like, hey, we would like to get to the bottom of it, like you too, because it's 3 in the morning and the last place I want to be is in the basement of this facility. So the quicker I can get out of here, the better. It's very interesting how IT folks can get the blame for that. And I think we've earned it, by you know
Sure.
what, I'm just going to turn this router off real quick and bring it back up, or the email server, whatever. We've all done that, I think, at different points.
Well, I mean, you see the in the media, or I mean, again, like you said, I've done it 1,000 times where, well, it's not working, so just reboot it. Like if you call tech support, that's the first thing they're going to ask you. You call, back in the day, I supported Dell hardware, Dell servers and such, and you'd call their support line, and that their tier 1 support, or that first level support. The first question they asked was, did you reboot it and have you updated the firmware? Like if you hadn't done those things, they wouldn't even ask they wouldn't let you ask any other questions. They wouldn't talk to you. Like you had to have done those 2 things before they would even take the next step in the process. Until there was a sidetrack you could do. If you got certified, you could take their certification, and that would bypass that first level support and get you to that next tier that would talk to you, because they could prove that you know what you're talking about. It's like when our cable modem goes down at home, or your home internet, you call the tech support and they're asking you all these questions, and you're just like, dude, I do this for a living. It's not any of those things. I'm not going to reboot my router. I've already done all those things. Like, get me to the next level, because this is not the problem. It's not my equipment. It's not my router. I've already rebooted the cable modem. Like, what is the next step?
It's the Ron Swanson moment in Home Depot. I know more than you.
Exactly. Well, and to your point though, and with OT is we're going into places that their job is not cyber. Their job is not technology. They're engineers. They understand how that equipment works, why it works. They know how to control it and program it and run it. That is their day-to-day job. And we're coming in and either maybe they're wearing an additional hat where they have some of that technology stuff, and obviously longer, this is that was 2010, and obviously 13 years later, it's a little bit more, but the ability for them to understand all the things that we're trying to do, it's impossible. So by default, they're going to not trust us. Like they're responsible. Their metrics are tied to uptime, availability. So all the things, to you and I, if we reboot the Exchange server, it's not a big deal. It doesn't impact my livelihood. It doesn't make me not go home at night. Maybe I have to go support it or somebody else does, but for them, it impacts their bonus. It impacts, their safety numbers that are downward. I mean, all of these things that we have no idea about, and we're coming in and saying all these big words that they don't understand. So how have you had those conversations and built that trust with these folks to allow them, get their value, get them to allow you to come in and kind of do the work that you need to get done?
Those are such good examples, and what I would attribute to the moderate level of success that I've had in the field is when I first went and worked at a consultancy. I went from the University of Tennessee to a local company here in Knoxville that just had all kinds of different customers. And I remember one of my first customers was a hospital. And I went in there, and the IT person for that particular hospital was wanting to burn the place down because people would not follow their rules,
right?
IT rules. And I was able to get into, areas that were locked in the hospital and get a bunch of PHI, and I was stealing all this data. And I remember thinking, man, this report is going to be scathing, and I'm just going to tear these people up. And then I didn't know I was actually in the ER wing at the time until I was pulling data off one of those mobile computers, and a guy walked out of the room and he was just covered in like blood. And he was doing what his job was to save someone's life or stabilize it. And that was a light bulb moment for me, where it was like, this was the guy that pushed the computer into the hallway and left it logged in. And that is small potatoes to the person in the room. And so that was kind of a moment for me somewhere around probably 2003, where I was like, that's just not this person's job.
Right.
And if I can't help them do their job or make it easier, and that's not to say, we don't accept the excuses of like, well, I don't have time to type in a longer password. Yes, you do. Right. Okay, that's not okay. But you do have to go in and say, well, what is the primary mission here? Well, the primary mission is to deliver water, deliver electricity, generate electricity, deliver gas, get gas out of the ground, or save lives, or whatever it is. And sometimes it's just a standard IT mission. And even that is not security most of the time.
Sure.
Even that is like, we want to keep track of Aaron's bank account, right? And so even then, security is an overlay on that, right? That's what we call them when we do one of our assessments. It's called a security overlay assessment. We want to see, do you have a firewall? Yes. Will it alert if we do this? Yes. So then we do that and say, did you get an alert? And they say no, 100% of the time. But and then they make a rule, and then they do get that. But I think learning, what is it that the mission is here, and how is what I'm going to do here going to help that or impact that? And it doesn't mean that there won't be changes that have to be made. And 100% of the time means that I'm going to have to learn something. And that again is just the providence of the Lord over the course of my career to put me in situations that were just humbling, and realize, like, I mean, if I hadn't seen that doctor come out of that room like that, what I would have written would have looked a lot different. I had to shift gears then, and then I had to realize when I went down to work with you, I think that was probably the third or fourth time I'd done something like that, that I need to figure out what these guys do for a living and how I can help with that. And because the first time I did it, I found a vulnerability in Siemens Wonderware, and the reason I got where I was doing this was with a friend of mine named Seth. I found a vulnerability, and I wasn't smart enough to figure out how to exploit it. I sent him the configuration file, and he wrote a little Perl script and turned it into was ICS cert, I think, because Siemens said it wasn't a problem, but it was a problem. It was very easy to decrypt their passwords with a Perl script. Actually, decrypt would probably be too strong of a word based on the crayon math they were using. But I wrote in that was a terrible report for those folks, and I kind of wish I'd toned that one down a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny, coming from consulting myself, one of the big four, and seeing some of those, and having some clients that have approached us, whether it was an audit that the company I was with had done, or somebody else, and they were coming to us for advice on what to do about it. Right. There was one client, and it was a manufacturer, and they had manufacturing facilities all around the world. And they basically came back and said, look, I've got 80,000 devices that need to be patched, and there is no way I can keep up with patching 80,000 devices. So giving me a report that says, the sky's falling because I have 80,000 devices that don't have the latest Windows patch is worthless. It doesn't help me, because there's no way I could hire an entire team and that could be 100% of their focus. But how much is that actually moving the ball on security, right? How much is that actually looking at that bigger mission of what am I trying to do? Like you said, coming out and you saw the doctor, the bigger mission for him was to save lives. So was that, that machine that he rolled out with, that was still logged in, is that a risk? Yes. But how can I protect that without making it harder on him so that he can still focus on the job that he has to do while not having to worry about the security and the password and the account, like isolate it. Like there's all sorts of other things we can do. And it's really easy in OT to walk into a site and see, oh, that has Windows XP. Yes, there's Windows XP still running our critical infrastructure today all over the country. And that's not a shock. That's not national secret. There's nothing proprietary about that. Like everybody knows it. And that's not the end of the world. It's not rip that out. Sometimes it's rip that out. Sometimes it's upgrade it. But sometimes it's just, what can I do to maintain, to put a box around it, or to isolate it, or to limit its risk while it can still do what it needs to do without impacting everything else. And understanding when you're writing that report and giving that reporting and that analysis, but you have to have that mindset. And a lot of the analysis that I see, they don't come in with that. They're just saying, oh, well, all these things are bad. Like, the teacher with the red marker, the whole thing is red. And that's not valuable, right? It's just all red. So, okay, I'm just going to throw that away. I already knew that. This is not valuable to me. I can't do anything about all those things. So I'm going to do nothing. It's just overwhelming to have that many things that I don't know what to do. Which one should I do first? Like, so talk about that from a little bit of, obviously it's easy to find problems. OT, you're going to find something. If you didn't find, if you walk in and do an assessment on a site and you didn't find anything, you weren't looking.
Yeah, that's 100% true. Yeah, I think the last good security framework that, and obviously I'm about to turn 52. I'm in the get off my lawn stage of life here. So back when I was walking to school both ways uphill in the snow,
Right.
I think 800-53 did a great job of really just being this foundational idea of building different layers of security. And they've called it different things over the years, defense in depth, and there's a few made up terms that get thrown in there every now and then for marketing, which I totally understand why folks do that. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. And it's just, well, let's go back to the Windows XP example, which, Windows XP might still be better than Windows 10. I'm not too sure yet. It's for sure better than Windows 11,
Right.
which is what we're using here. But I'll tell you, if you've got something in your environment that is a problem, there's just different way. If you can't go and update that, you can monitor it more.
Sure.
Or you can learn to monitor logins to it and say, there's only this one account that can get on it. And if it gets on it, has this limited function. You can put whitelisting rules in from one network segment to another. There's just all kinds of different layers you can put on top of that, because it can be overwhelming to come in and say, you've got to patch all this stuff. And that's not to say also that there aren't times when that excuse isn't valid.
Sure.
Okay, I've got 80,000 things I need to patch. Well, you're a multi-billion-dollar global organization. Go ahead and hire a couple of people.
Right.
And we get told, and I'm sure you've been told before, like I had a customer one time say, hey, I need you to just recommend products. And we don't recommend products. We're vendor agnostic because I can't hire people. And I said, I'm going to recommend that you hire two FTEs because you bought this thing over here, but you don't have a human assigned to that.
Sure.
And I know automation is a big word in the world today, but most stuff still isn't automated. It still takes a human to sit there and make a decision and say, this is good or this is bad, or this is what needs to happen when this Windows XP device over here that we can't upgrade, when we see some strange packets going towards it, or we see weird authentication to it, a human needs to say, somebody walk over there.
Right.
Or somebody look at this packet capture and see what's going on. But I think there's lots of different things you can do when you can't follow the traditional, hey, go patch this, or hey, upgrade this OS, especially when it's embedded in some, who knows what the thing does, lights a boiler or opens a gate in a dam or something, that isn't just getting taken out, right? It's because we're not going back to the hand crank or whatever, and I can't recommend putting Windows 11 in it because I think that's offloading everything to the cloud all of a sudden.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's, the analogy I've used many times, probably too many times, but I can go buy the best woodworking tools in the world and they can sit in my garage. But unless I go out there and do something with them, they're not going to build me a desk by themselves. It doesn't matter how great the tools are. And, I work for a software company and my product is great. But my product by itself sitting in the corner is not going to do any good unless there's people, process, and technology. And if I don't have somebody that understands those products and can run them and manage them and maintain them and get the value out of them, then buying a tool is not going to solve your problems. You can buy every tool in the book and it's not going to fix your cyber.
That is such a good example. I've done this live before and I've only done it once and it went okay. So I'm going to start doing it more. But I would go to a conference and I took one of my guitars.
Yeah.
And I took it's a 1996 Taylor 815. They don't make it anymore. It's pretty expensive. And I see the audience a little bit. I ask, it's going to take some boldness, if you want to be my example here. And I ask, is there anybody that's willing to play this in front of people? And I'll get somebody that has never played and I'll hand it to them and I don't tell them anything about the instrument. I'm just like, go ahead and play it. And of course it's a train wreck,
Yeah.
And then take it back and say, well, is it the fault of the instrument? And then I'll ask, is there anybody here that's played out, and hand it to that person and say, let's play 145 in D. And they just go off. And then you tell them, it's not about what you're holding here. Now there is some this is a good product.
Sure.
But at the same time, you know, player two knew what he was doing.
Right.
And player one did not. And so it makes a huge difference knowing how to use the tools that you've been given. And you know, getting training in environments is paramount. And there's a lot of good training out there right now. We just put a couple of our guys through different training things. We're real pleased with both of the courses that they selected, and really impressed with some of the offerings that are out there now where people can go and learn these things. I think you just got back from somewhere where they had, you know, the ICS village set up, and
Yep.
man, if I've never seen it, but I know the people that built it, and I 100% know that would be a learning experience to see that.
Yeah, you know, that's a great organization. We are very much in helping and supporting that message, because you know they're doing a Hack the Capitol event in DC in May. And that event is not about technical. You know, you and I, before we started recording, we were talking about different conferences and how much I love DEF CON, because I love the geeky diving into the tech, and, you know, no sales guys, just tech and trying to hack things and figure things out. The Hack the Capitol event with ICS Village is the exact opposite. It is 100% talking to congressmen and senators and their staffers that have zero technology background. So you're having these conversations like you're explaining it to, you know, your mom, or, you know, your grandmother, or, you know, the lady down the street that's asking for technology help. Like, they don't get it. And it's not their fault. Like, how could they, right? You know, some of these senators and congressmen are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. There's no way that anybody, I don't care what your age is and what your background, I'm not going to be an expert in everything. Something else we said before we started recording: if I'm the smartest guy in the room, I'm in the wrong room. Like, we need to surround ourselves with people that have knowledge. And when we don't know, don't allow our egos to get in the way of asking questions and finding somebody and saying, hey, Slade, I know you and I work together. I trust you. What do you think? And it's okay that you know more than me. I want you to know more than me. I want to be able to reach out and have a network of people that I can reach out to when I'm having these problems. And I think that's a bigger issue in OT is, again, those control guys, those engineers, those folks, they're in a different world. They're not in this technology world. So they need people like you and I that understand the technology side, but can build that camaraderie and that trust with them and be able to speak their language, to be able to be that mediary in between the highly technical and the sales guys that tell them, you know, buy my product and it solves all your problems, and the engineer that doesn't know, but all he knows is, I've got to do something, and what I have won't work, and I don't have a big budget, so what do I do? Right? So they believe the sales guy. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's not.
Yeah, I was in you know, software engineering does that as well. I remember being on site for a test one time. I don't remember what kind of business it was, maybe an insurance company, I'm not positive. But I was wandering around the place after hours, you know, looking for passwords or plugging in, you know, rubber duckies and just, you know, pilfering stuff. And on one of the whiteboards, it said, you know, they were developing a new piece of software, and it said security at the top, and they said, you know, things this software does equals works. Things the software doesn't do equals not works, you know, and that's all they, you know, that if the lights came on, you know, that's my role here. And I think that is starting to get, you know, a little more intertwined with security and safety, as, you know, it makes the news all the time now, whether it's some balloon or some substation doing whatever. I think, you know, it gets a little elevated and intertwined for a while, but at the end of the day, yeah, it's like, you know, I want this software to do these three things, and make sure it does that, right? And
Right.
then when you go and test it and it does, you know, it doesn't encrypt passwords well, which gives an operator too much, you know, engineer access to the console, you know, that wasn't what was being thought of at the time. And to their credit, you know, a lot of companies have really upped their game in that. You know, Schweitzer is one of those that I just think of, like, boy, they really hired a team of security people and beat their own stuff up. And you know, some meter vendors have done, actually all the meter vendors have done that at this point. Just, you know, different world than it was 10, 11 years ago as far as security research being woven into it. But at the same time, the function of that meter is still count those kilowatts,
Yep.
as they roll through, count them so we can bill them. All right.
Yep.
And I'm all for it. I think,
Yeah.
that is the primary function. I want the doctor not thinking about his password. And I think what that hospital ended up doing, to kind of back up to that, I think they ended up going with like the CAT card type of thing, like the military uses.
Right.
I think they found some sort of hardware, and they could just wear it. They were all wearing a lanyard anyway, so they could plug it in. And then if they pushed it away, and it logged them out, and
Yeah.
no more access, so remove the responsibility from the doctor in that case. And same with other industries. Can we remove some of that burden from them? I think Google offered to take care of all my passwords for me the other day, which I declined. But
Oh, really?
what a
Huh.
kind offer of them.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah. You just hit on that, right? Is so, you've got these password vaults and managers, and one of the ones that's, especially here lately, been in the news so much is LastPass. You try to do good, you try to have unique passwords and complex passwords and all these things, and you use a password manager like a LastPass, and you've got your own encryption key, and maybe you're using, multi-factor authentication, you've got a YubiKey and all these other things that you're trying to do, and then they release their, that they get hacked, and they basically release all of their customer data to whoever hacked them. So all the things that you're doing, and I think it goes back to what you said earlier, right? Is it's that defense in depth, and being able to understand and not have a single point of failure impact you. It's one of the reasons why having unique passwords. So if somebody guesses my email password, they can't get into my bank, or my bank password doesn't get into my credit union, and all those things, is it can impact one thing, but they can't take over my whole everything, right? And the intent is, okay, I noticed something happened over there, I'm going to go change all the rest so that I'm limiting my impact. And it's the same thing that we do in security, and a good security model is going to have that same mindset. I'm going to compartmentalize these environments, and I'm going to provide controls and monitoring in these areas. So maybe I'm not doing a response where I'm blocking a firewall, but I want to notify and pick up the phone, and so somebody can take action. But to your point, if there's not anybody there, if they haven't hired that resource that's looking at the data, the tool itself can be sitting there screaming all day long, but nobody's there to take action and do anything about it.
Yeah, you brought up like segmentation right there. And again, I've been a penetration tester for 115 years at this point. And what really started making network segmentation happen were things like PCI compliance regulation, because if you didn't do it, you got a fine.
Right.
And you would think it would be the same for like HIPAA, but it's not, because they again realize, like, well, we really have to keep these people alive first, right?
Yes.
But boy, when we go in places now, and they want us to test our cardholder data environment versus our regular IT, can't move from one to the other. Similarly in OT, and I remember this from back working with you back then. We went into that one room that was way up on, with the 6-sided and the guys with the guns. You're not getting in that room, first of all, without leaking. You'll probably be leaking by the time you get in there. But if you do, the rules were different in there, right? The IT network it had its whole own segmented thing going on in there, and there were tons of vulnerabilities in there. But getting in there was prohibitively difficult. And I remember they were using like raw FTP and stuff like that in there, and it was pretty easy to get into certain things. But we had to put in the report, like, you're not getting in here. And if you've gotten in there, watch out for the zombies or something else,
right?
Because the world has probably changed at this point. If some computer nerd has gotten into this room after getting past the guys at the desk. But yeah, it's about having those specialized environments and the different controls around them. But PCI is the thing that we've noticed has really kind of made people start doing that, because when they have an audit, they'll get a fine, or they won't be compliant, and then they can't accept money, and that's a big deal. We can't accept money, we're changing things. But when we go somewhere that isn't regulated, I want to say maybe in all my years, I've seen one place do segmented networking and block someone in accounting from, I don't know, pick another, business model within the company. It never happens. So, and then to your other point earlier, you put all these layers, like you held up your YubiKey, but you go to the utility and the board of directors, so, you know, has some lady or gentleman that's 75, 85 years old that's on the board, and they're like, well, I want to be able to see all that power information on my phone.
Yep.
And that person doesn't have a YubiKey, and they do
Correct.
not have a strong password. Their password is their first grandchild's name.
And if they use that same password on everything they have.
Yeah, Henry is the password for everything, and we're in trouble because
Yep.
now we've got a weak link. And there's even for that, you just have to know that for that special individual. And if you've ever worked desktop support, you learned how to deal with that because you
Yep.
went and installed the same printer every day for that same person. You just have to say, well, you know, we need to watch this person's devices a little closer maybe than some others. And that's not, you know, derogatory towards them at all. It's just they come from a different this is a whole new world, and we see that rapidly all the time now. There's a ton of stuff out there I don't understand. You know, I can barely work my TV. I'll go get my 16-year-old, be like, hey, can you show me how to?
Right.
Okay.
Well, and you know, that's an important piece as well. And I think we've hit it a few times, but understanding where you're at and what the purpose is. So I can set a password. So thinking back to power utilities and in a control room, the operators need those screens to be running 24/7. They're not individually logging into them. I don't know when Bob's sitting there, Steve, because at the end of the day, it's more important that whoever is in that room can take action and shut the unit down or control it than it is to know that Bob is doing that work or Steve is doing that work or to lock somebody out. Because to get to that room, there's security guards and there's multiple physical barricades and there's cameras and there's all these other things that are being watched and implemented to mitigate some of those just from somebody walking in off the street and sitting down. It's manned 24 hours a day. There's never anybody not in those seats. So if I walked in and they don't recognize me, they're going to be looking at me and they're not going to let me walk up to that operator workstation and plug something in. I would, especially in Texas, that would not be something that would happen. But
Austin might do it there.
Well, yeah, maybe Austin, but definitely not where I live. But you know, I've seen control rooms where, you know, they've got a sticky note with the password, you know, sitting on the monitor. And as a security professional, it's very easy and bringing my team through and doing assessments with, you know, third party, you know, assessors that come in and them seeing that and seeing the reaction from some folks of, wow, I can't believe how bad that is. Why do they have the password up there? To being able and having that conversation around why it's more important that they can get into this than it is that password. So I'd rather remove the password and put other mitigating controls around that room. Let's protect this chair so that nobody can sit in this chair. And if you get to this point, to your point, if a hacker walks in that room, a lot of other bad things have happened for him to be able to get to that point. Maybe not to the extreme of like a nuclear facility, but still somebody's going to have recognized it. But I can't just go put complex passwords on everything because then it's going to stop my ability to do the thing it's supposed to do. If I can't log in and I can't get onto that box to stop the unit, like something's going on and I can't react to it quick enough, then it's going to trip. It could cause life and limb, all these safety and availability issues. And that's not valuable. Then I'm going to remove the security controls completely and tell my security people to get out because I just impacted the actual operation, the thing that it was supposed to do. I'm supposed to create widgets. You stop my ability to be able to create widgets. I don't need you anymore. Get out. It's not worth it, right? Because at the end of the day, the bottom line, the company's trying to make and sell widgets, and I can't get in the way of that. I need to make it where I can do that and still do the job without impacting them, right?
Yeah, and in those environments like that, I mean, I remember the first location, and again, I wish I could remember where we were because it was kind of out in the middle of nowhere. One of the guys had gone to, I actually still have the screenshot of this somewhere. One of the guys had gone to Best Buy and bought a Netgear wireless router. Do you remember that? And he put it outside the control room.
Yep.
And we were able to sit outside and it had no password on it. And you could go from there into the. And I remember the guy you were working for at the time was a fairly firm gentleman about stuff like that.
Yep.
Gentleman would be the wrong word in this case, but those people were like making excuses about why they had to do this. And I think he just like tore that thing out. This is mine now. And those were not cheap. I mean, those are
No.
still not, wireless routers are still expensive. And back then, I mean, those guys had put that in there and they're like, now they had circumvented the ability to protect the chair, right? And
Yeah, exactly.
it was yeah, that was pretty funny. That was my first experience with that. And oh, that was bad news. But
so what do you see that, in the last few years since you've been doing this? You talked about how some vendors are doing better. Some are, have really brought in security folks, and you're seeing some better controls around some of the equipment. So what are you hopeful for in the next 5 to 10 years? What are you hopeful for in the cyber world? And maybe what's something that concerns you around, the things that you see maybe people aren't attacking or looking at?
yeah, let's start with the bad news and end with the good news. How
Sure.
that be? So the bad news is I'm getting ready to go talk at Tech Advantage. Are you familiar with Tech Advantage?
Yep.
So I'm gonna do the closing session with a couple of other guys, and we're gonna talk about substation security.
Okay.
And one of the things, and that's in the news right now, right? Because
Sure.
a couple of dodos went and tried to do some damage, and they did a little damage, and it wasn't, but power was back on pretty quick because
Right.
you know what utilities know how to do? Send you power.
That's right.
So I put together 4 questions because the thing that concerns me is the way the news amplifies bad news.
Yeah.
And that doesn't matter if it's an election or some sort of public altercation or a substation. And I asked 4 questions like, how many outages are intentionally malicious versus unintentional? What's the number one source of outages? What is your primary concern regarding defenses against these? And what does marketing, like vendors or your overarching organization, whatever, I won't name any right here, but I did name it in this, tell you that your number one concern should be? And that was the one that I really wanted to get some metrics on. And I'm getting answers back that say things like this: they are not focusing on traditional threats, the things that really cause these problems, like squirrels and branches and ice, okay, or car wrecks. That's what causes power outages, not people with guns. That does happen, but very rarely.
Right.
And the power is not off any longer when they do it versus when these other things happen. He said, but they're not focusing on those because they are not sexy enough. And so that is my downer. We live in a society that wants interaction and clicks and engagement, and that's how you get it. You amplify things like that, regardless of what the subject is.
Yeah.
What gives me hope is there are people out there, and this has been going on in IT for a while, that say we're going to get rid of that FUD, right? We're going to remove that out of here. And people are getting so good at identifying it. Especially, these are vice presidents of engineering and operations that are sending this kind of stuff to me, CISOs at electric co-ops and things like that. They know what they really have to focus on. They know how to deliver stuff, and regardless of the industry, banks know how to deliver their widget.
Yep.
People are getting better and better at delivering their widget. Customer service has kind of taken a hit in the last few years with, all the work from home push and minimum wage push and stuff. That's kind of taken a hit. I think that'll self-correct as well. But the things that give me hope, though, are watching people really. People are wanting to learn. How can we do different layers when we can't do this? People are willing to push back on reports. When people get a poor report from somebody, say they just went in and scanned stuff and didn't verify any vulnerabilities or didn't do any physical hands-on stuff, looking at operator workstations or software levels or grabbing packets, they really know to challenge that now. Whereas when I started in the industry, you could kind of walk in and people thought, well, we don't really know. Is this like some kind of Jason Bourne thing here?
Right.
Or, like, no, I'm just it's not. And people are really getting smarter, and they're really learning more about stuff. Their YouTube is out there that has, you go in there, you used to be able to go in there and say a bunch of words nobody understood. Now they'll go look it up and they'll be like, hey, I don't think that's how that works, And so I'm very hopeful that people are continuing to learn and educate themselves with different ways to do that. But the downside is that we like the bad news sometimes, and that kind of bubbles to the surface. Are you seeing similar stuff?
Yeah, it's easy to see. I mean, you look at the advertisement on LinkedIn or anything, and you see all the OT vendors, and I'm one of them, right? Is the vendors, not the ones necessarily doing this, but they really focus on the skies falling, nation states and Russia and Iran and all these bad things that are happening. And they're not wrong, but to your point, more than likely the bad things that are happening are squirrels get in and trip something, right? And or there's an old piece of equipment, or Bob from accounting accidentally logged in the wrong system and did something wrong. You see that way more frequently. That doesn't mean that you don't need to do anything. It just means that you need to be upfront. And in my experience, and I think one of the reasons why I've excelled in my career and I've been able to build relationships with people in the C-suite and people at the plants is because I'm not trying to sell it for something it is. I'm not trying to fear and brimstone. I'm not trying any of that. I think if you're just real and honorable in that conversation, and you just say, hey, I'm not sure, these are the reasons we're doing this. There are these nation states, government will tell you a lot of these things. We haven't seen those things. That doesn't mean we don't need to prepare for it, but more likely it's one of these types of things. Like segmentation is not just a good thing to do because because of China attacking us. It's also good because if I segment it, then I'm isolating a normal problem. Bob from accounting logging into the wrong system and turning something off will impact a smaller subset of systems instead of my entire manufacturing facility. Maybe it's just one line. And then I realize what Bob did and I can react to it quicker. So there's ways that you can communicate and have those things without saying the sky is falling. And if you don't buy my product, then, your whole company is going to fail.
I love it. Yeah, the first time I was on a phone call with several people, and I said, "What is the number one cause of outages?" And the instant response from one of these people was dove season. Yeah, and somebody else said like hold my beer or whatever. Like okay, yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, it's not as bad as perhaps the news makes it look like. There's bad folks out there that want to do bad things, but there's more good folks, I think, that want to do good things and defend things the right way. And then the buzzword bingo thing gets thrown out. I remember one time several years ago, somebody said, "Hey, will you come talk at our conference?" I said, "Sure." They said, "No, we want you to talk about blockchain." I said, "Oh no, I'm not going to do that." And they said, "Why not?" I said, "Do you know what blockchain is?" And they said, "Well, it's going to secure everything." I said, "It's a crypto function. Okay.
Right.
It isn't gonna fix your phone
Right.
from being whatever, or your weak Wi-Fi password. Okay.
Right.
So yeah, so I don't think can I pick my own topic? Because if not, I think maybe you should do it,
Right. Yeah. And you look at all the things that are out there, right? And the knowledge that people are coming with and having these conversations. The thing that I see best and kind of mirroring what you said, right, is the things that I see these people understanding when I'm having these conversations with these control engineers, these plants, these very smart people, but they're not technology people. They understand more. They've heard it. They know that their vendors are the ones bringing this technology. Like the reason that we're having these concerns and a lot of these risks in the OT world is because the vendors are bringing in commercially off the shelf products. They're bringing in Cisco switches. They're bringing in IP. They're bringing in all this stuff and dropping it into an OT world. But you have to maintain that stuff too. Like 30 years ago, all that stuff was analog. It was proprietary. It wasn't on the network. It didn't have routing. It didn't have programmable logic. I had to sit in front of it to program. I had to get in the room. All the problems were in the room, right? And now I can do it from my phone, like you said, the board director, right? I can do all those things from anywhere. And if I can do it from my office across the street, then I can do it from Seattle, and I can do it from China, or I can do it from Iran, or I can do it from anywhere. So we have that, but it's better that I see that more and more people are understanding those risks, and they're starting to ask those questions. Because before, the vendors, they just 100% blindly followed whatever the vendor told them. And now they're asking more questions. Hey, what risk does this bring? what else do I need to do if I choose this option? If you bring in this new product, what else will I have to do? Does it have security on it? How will I maintain it? How do I integrate it with the other things that I have, like Active Directory and monitoring and my firewalls and all these other things that we have and we need to start thinking about? So just the fact that they're able to ask some questions, even if they're just entry-level basic questions, that's a good start.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's been encouraging to see folks grow, see the field get bigger. You know, there's tons of people. I mean, I think there's a SANS certification for it now.
Yep.
And I don't know anything. I know Don is one of the teachers, Don Weber, and
Yep.
he's a great guy. So, and so it's great to see the field kind of expanding. And at the same time, it gets a little nerve wracking because everybody does want to be a player that was traditionally not in there. And we'll see what happens. But overall, I think most things are fine. And the things continue to get better. I think you had some rolling blackouts though, so maybe you wouldn't agree with me.
We did.
I don't
Yeah.
think that had anything to do with hackers.
No, that was all ice.
And I think closing down all those plants we looked at 16 years ago or however long ago it was.
Not having enough rolling capacity does seem to impact things.
Yeah, it's weird. You know, it's a caloric deficit or something all of a sudden.
Yep, everything works until it doesn't.
That's right. That's good. That's good stuff.
All right, Slade, sir, I really appreciate your time and taking your time here, and I look forward to hearing your talk at the upcoming conference, sir.
Oh man, great to talk with you too. Look forward to doing it again soon.
All right, sir. Thank you.
You bet.